Black Myth Wukong is absolutely killing it right now. And I think there's a few reasons for this, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. But let's take a look at the Steam charts briefly over here on steamdb.info. And you can see right now at 12:43 p.m. Eastern time, there is currently 1.4 million concurrent players on Steam alone playing this game. And below that in second place, we have Counter-Strike at 1,050,000 concurrent players on Steam alone. But keep in mind, Counter-Strike didn't just come out. Black Myth just came out. So of course there's going to be more hype around a new game. But let's put that into perspective here. If we go to the all-time peak, this is actually insane. Black Myth Wukong hit 2.2 million concurrent players, more than 2.2 million concurrent players on Steam, which if we're comparing it to Counter-Strike like I just did, Counter-Strike only capped out at 1.8 million concurrent players. This is actually crazy. And what you'll notice right away in the top 5 here, actually the top 6, Black Myth Wukong is the only single player action RPG in this list. PUBG Battlegrounds is online multiplayer competitive game. Pal World is an online survival game, although I think you can play it single player, but it is kind of like a multiplayer survival experience. Counter-Strike 2, of course, online multiplayer competitive. Lost Ark is an MMO, and then Dota 2 is a very, very online competitive type game, with Cyberpunk being the first action RPG, I guess you could say, on this list, and they only topped out at 1.5 million concurrent players on Steam. Now, with that said, some of these games are more popular on consoles than others, and Cyberpunk was big for consoles as well. But man, Black Myth Wukong at 2.2 million concurrent players, this is crazy, and this is absolutely a record for single player action RPGs. Now, people are going to argue left and right if Black Myth Wukong should be considered a Souls-like game or if it shouldn't, whatever. There's definitely some similarities to Souls games in the Souls-like genre, of course. And that brings us to Elden Ring right here, which was, you know, one of the biggest hits of the past, I would say, decade for us Western gamers here. And Elden Ring only topped out at 953,000 concurrent players on Steam. Of course, there's other variables that go into this, like how many players played on console, etc. But still, this is from Software's Elden Ring, and Black Myth Wukong more than doubled that. And of course, since I cover Baldur's Gate 3 all the time, almost tripled Baldur's Gate 3 with 875,000 concurrent players on Steam. Now, I've played Black Myth for about 5 hours now, give or take, and my initial impressions of this game are very, very good. I had a great time. I think the visuals are outstanding. It runs decently on my computer. The combat is a lot of fun. It feels unique compared to other action RPGs. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do that you can't do in most other games. The character designs are super cool. The boss designs are really, really fun, even though I haven't really encountered anything insanely difficult yet. It's been really, really engaging and fun to engage in these boss fights with these systems and mechanics. So it's got a huge thumbs up from me. But with that said, I think most people are probably going to agree with me when I say that I don't think Black Myth Wukong is going to make like my top 5 or top 10 games of all time, like games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring or Bloodborne has. I don't think it necessarily has that, even though I think it's a really good game. We're kind of in like the hype bias right now, which we have to let settle down a little bit and everybody can gather their thoughts, etc. Let's just take a quick look real fast. On Steam, the game does have overwhelmingly positive reviews right now, with 105,000 reviews already in right now, which is really, really good. If we take a look at Metacritic really quickly, on Metacritic, the Metascore from critics here is 81, still to be determined by users. But if we look at Elden Ring, we had a 96 critic score, 8.1 user score, so way less on the user score. Cyberpunk, 86 critic score, 7.2 user score. Then we have Baldur's Gate 3, 96 with an 8.8 user score. There's a little bit of a trend going on here. The user score tends to be less than the critic score. Bloodborne, 92, and then 9.0 for user. Hogwarts Legacy was just about tied here. That's not saying that that's going to happen with Black Myth Wukong, and actually I think it's going to be higher in this case than the critic score here is my guess, but I don't think it's going to be insanely higher. So what you have here is probably a game that's scoring solidly in the 8 or 9 out of 10 range, but it's not getting like a 96 or anything like Elden Ring did or Baldur's Gate 3, yet its numbers are absolutely destroying Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring and Cyberpunk on the Steam charts here. And I think there are certain reasons for this. This game is a little bit different than all these other games that a lot of us are used to playing. This is a game made by a Chinese developer called Gamescience, and although I think they are technically independent, they definitely have a lot of investments. I think Tencent owns a percentage of the company, kind of similar to Larian Studios. That doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing unless you completely just despise anything that Tencent's associated with, which is about 70% of the video games that you probably play. And I think there's another company that also invested a big chunk into Gamescience to make this game, but they're not under the umbrella of a gigantic publisher. And from what I've read, it seems like Gamescience really was able to do what they wanted to do with the game, and their relationship with companies like Tencent was more so just for money, and Tencent didn't really have any control over the creative design of the game, kind of like Baldur's Gate 3. And that is really, really good to see this, because we are seeing kind of a rise in these independent studios that are kind of have a vision for their game and they're pulling through with it, and then we're seeing these games become successful. We have Baldur's Gate 3, Pal World is number 3 on the Steam charts, and now Black Myth Wukong, and there might be another one in there. Absolutely love to see this, but the point that I'm making here is that this is a Chinese game. China has a very large population, and this is China's probably first ever internationally successful AAA game. I can't even think of the last like huge Chinese video game that I played. China's very focused on mobile games. I think up to 80%, maybe even more than 80% of their market is all mobile. That's what China invests in. That's what people play. That's what people look forward to over there. And this is kind of like an outlier. We have this game that is becoming internationally successful, and you're hitting China's population, and you're also hitting the Western audience at the same time. Now, I did do some quick research, and it does appear as if you can use Steam in China. Certain games might be blocked, and I'm not exactly sure where Chinese players would purchase Elden Ring, etc., if they would use Steam or they would use something else. But all those games don't have as much of a focus, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, etc., they don't have as much of a focus on China as Black Myth does, as it's based on Chinese mythology, the story of Sun Wukong, a very, very popular story that's been told for countless generations. So you have kind of ignited the hype of the Chinese population, but made a game that also appeals to a Western audience, and you're also selling it on Steam in China. Even if the majority of Chinese players don't play it on Steam, even if only a small number of Chinese players play it on Steam over in China. Remember, a small number for China is a huge number for most other countries when you think of the population over there and the amount of people that play games, etc. And right here is an interesting little pie chart that was created by Game Discover Co. And it was tweeted out about 8 hours ago, so morning time, Eastern time. And they actually show here, however they arrived at this, I don't know. I don't know how to even verify this, so this could be wrong, but it does make sense. They show that as of 8 hours ago, morning time, Eastern time, 88.1% of players on Steam for Black Myth Wukong were from China. 88.1%. The United States just has this little sliver right here. Now keep in mind that this game did actually launch at 10 p.m. Eastern, so most of the states were sleeping during this game's like initial launch period, and China was, I don't know the exact time difference, but at least some of China was awake at this time. So even if the peak was, let's say the peak was 2 million at the time that they came up with this 8 hours ago, well, if the United States has 3% of that 2 million, that's still 60,000 concurrent players for this game, which is actually still really, really damn good. But you have a majority of it here coming from China, of course. Now, as the day goes on, like right now, the United States wakes up, Europe is already up, people come home from work. You would think that this would kind of get a little bit bigger here for a lot of these countries. And of course, maybe on the weekend, it will also get bigger also for Western countries. But regardless, this is obviously a really big success for China, also the West, and this is how you arrive at numbers that kind of feel like they're too high. If you're coming from a Western audience perspective and you play this game, you think, oh, this is a really good game, this is awesome, but it doesn't really make sense to a lot of us why it would be so much higher than a game like Elden Ring or Cyberpunk. Now it starts to make sense a little bit here. And that's not to downplay the success of this game. I want it to keep rising. I love to see companies that are independent, that don't have huge publishers, become successful, and I think this is a really good game and it deserves the praise. I think it's going to encourage other companies to create good games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring hopefully do as well. But perhaps even more importantly, I think we should expect China to now be a major competitor. I mean, over the next decade or so, to become a major competitor in the AAA video games industry. And I would say competition is pretty damn good. I think this is going to cause a lot of Western companies that might be kind of on a bad downward slope to step up their game to compete with what China's putting out, because it seems like China is now seeing that it can be profitable and could be a good endeavor to actually invest into AAA international video games, games that sell to international audiences. And this will also be interesting to see how a lot of Western audiences handle getting their game to sell in China, how they go about that, you know, Chinese voiceover, Chinese translation and text, etc. I think this is pretty cool, and I think this is a big win for everybody here, because we're hopefully just going to keep getting better and better games. But I just wanted to provide a little bit of perspective here as to why this may be occurring here. You have a really good game made by an independent studio, I think, that is also appealing to not only China, but also a Western audience. All those factors together create what we see here with Black Myth Wukong, which is super, super cool. So thank you guys for watching. Maybe I'll update everybody on this more in a couple days or so as things develop here and we get more information and I can verify more sources. But congratulations to Black Myth Wukong. I'm going to be playing it tonight for sure. I'll catch you all in the next one.